Welcome to Auburn, built in 1812 by Boston attorney Lyman Hardin. The beautiful property is now in the possession of the city of Natchez, Mississippi. Join us while we watch the students of the Tulane Preservation and Conservation Department document this beautiful structure to begin its restoration.
My name is Brent Fortenberry. I'm the director of the Tulane School of Architecture program in Heritage and Preservation. We're in Natchez, Mississippi this week as a part of our studio that focuses on assessing, analysis, and building documentation. And we're here at Auburn, which is an 1812 building that's owned by the city of Natchez. It's one of the earliest suburban villas in Natchez. And so as a part of our studio, we're doing intensive investigations and documentation of the building to understand its evolution in terms of plan, construction, and finish, and really try and interpret it within the wider context of Natchez and the lower Mississippi Valley in the 19th century up until the time of the Civil War. You know, we've been here all week, and really it takes a long time to really dig down and investigate how an historic building works, what it means, all of the construction and finish and plan all lead into a broader understanding of the social context of this building within the early 19th century in Natchez. One of the things that's really fascinating about this building is that the roof system was really innovative for its time. So it uses a queen post truss roof system. That might sound like some sort of complicated framing system, but really what it is in the early 19th century, it was a cutting edge construction system that they were importing from England and London at the time. It was introduced in the early 17th century in England, but really didn't show up in the American South until the first quarter of the 19th century. And so this is the early example of a queen post truss roof that I've seen in Natchez in Louisiana. And it's understanding not just this building in Natchez, but also in the broader context of the Atlantic world during the 19th century that really helps us provide an understanding and interpretation for, not just for our students, but for people who come and visit these sites in Natchez every day. So what happens is essentially the unit, it spins around 180 degrees and it captures spatial information by sending out thousands of beams of light, laser beams, a second. So as it's spinning around, anything that the mirror, as it spins, can see visually, line of sight, it sends out that beam, and then it measures how long it takes that beam to hit the first surface that it hits and then bounce back. In a minute and 51 seconds, it collects over 13 million points of data. After it collects the raw data, it then stops, and then a series of cameras takes a series of overlapping panoramic images that it then goes in and colorizes each one of those points with an LAB value. Once one scan finishes, you then move the unit with some overlap between 20 to 10% overlap, and then you do it again. Once you work your way around a building, you have then a model that then a software program registers all together and then allows you to have an accurate visualization of a building. It's as accurate as hand measurement, but you capture so much more information using the scanner. And so we can take the point cloud into all the architectural softwares that we use between AutoCAD or Revit, and then we can model the building using that point cloud. Where we've lost some stucco on the columns or where there's biogrowth on the wall, that's all mapped accurately in this model. And so we can use this to create high resolution, historic structures reports, conditions surveys, all those things, just using this technology that would otherwise take a huge investment in individuals and time.
It's finally happened! What all of you have been asking for so long. I have become a lady. Thanks to Established Titles, an incredible organization out of Scotland that gives you the opportunity to officially change your name to either Lady or Laird. It goes back to the ancient Scottish tradition of landowners in Scotland using the titles of Lady or Lord, or laird. Established titles allows you to buy at minimum 1 square foot of land in Aberdeenshire, Scotland. They also will plant a tree in your honor with each purchase and give you an official plot number. Best of all, you can officially change your name to Lady or Laird.
It makes an amazing last-minute gift. Established Titles is actually running a massive early Black Friday sale right now. Plus, if you use code RESTORATION, you get an additional 10% off. Go to establishedtitles.com/restoration to get your gifts now and help support our channel. The first 200 people purchasing a title pack using our link will effectively be next to my plot within a few minutes of walking distance. We can create our own little Restoration Nation kingdom. Established Titles is a fun and novel way to preserve the natural woodlands of Scotland while helping global reforestation efforts. Its land is on a private estate in Edelston, Scotland. They work with global charities One Tree Planted and Trees for the Future to support global reforestation efforts.
Do yourself a favor. Do something magical for yourself or your loved one today. If you're like me and you find gift giving impossible because all of your friends and family already have everything that they need or want because they buy it for themselves, make them something special today. Make them a lord or a lady with established titles.
What's really fascinating about this building and its plan is that typically during this period you might see what's called a center passage plan. So you'd enter directly into a passage and you think of that as sort of the circulation highway of the building. What they've done in this case, Levi Weeks, the architect who came here from New York, what he's done is he's actually created a T-shaped circulation plan. And what that means is that when you first enter, you have this wide part of the passage and then an extension of that passage through the rear of the building. Why he's done that is to showcase this freestanding circular staircase and really sort of present it as one enters into the building, even before they've entered any of the spaces of hospitality. And so in Natchez, we really don't see this plan at all during the first quarter of the 19th century, and it's all predicated on the idea that he's showing off essentially the architecture of this staircase. And really it's in an amazing condition. It is, again, one of the only examples that I know of in Mississippi and Louisiana. In terms of this building itself, it really represents the beginning of the pattern of the suburban villa in Natchez. And so what that means is that these buildings, other structures like Longwood, which is much later, Stanton Hall, Melrose, they are not working plantation sites and they're not sort of urban town sites. They're really these spaces that are focused on hospitality. We jokingly say they're party houses because essentially their primary purpose was for hospitality and socialization. And so all these buildings can be understood within that context of hospitality and really is a pattern that isn't in existence anywhere in North America. And they're bringing a template of suburban villas from the Thames Valley outside of London to Mississippi because of the wealth that allowed them to build these really opulent buildings because of the cotton trade. The core of the building is really sort of one room deep in 1812, and then we think by 1830, 1840, we get the extension of the wings on either side, and you can see that in the architecture. Additionally, originally there was only a kitchen quarter in the back, and if you look at the Historic American Building Survey photographs of this from the early 1920s, you can actually see there's an elevated walkway that connects the kitchen quarter to the main house. And so there's this really strong emphasis on efficiency of service for these structures. And additionally, probably around 1830, we get additional two sets of outbuildings. So one is the billiard hall, which is just to the east of the main block, and then we get a dairy. And the carriage house, which is about a quarter of a mile away down the road, which is now in the middle of the golf course, sort of rounds out the sort of set of four dependency buildings that are a part of this early suburban villa site. Now, essentially what happens here is that when Auburn gets constructed and more suburban villas follow on, so really if we think about the earliest suburban villas at Rosalie and Arlington, these are these sort of early examples of suburban villas, and you have to think about these buildings as ways that wealthy individuals are positioning themselves and self-fashioning themselves within Natchez society and society of lower Mississippi. And so they are essentially trying to outdo themselves in terms of over-the-top architecture. And so here, Rosalie gets a back porch a little bit later in the 1830s. They put one on back here. And so it really is this sort of tit for tat in terms of monumental architecture, relatively speaking, in Natchez. And so we can see the way that these kinds of buildings take off, and then in style, the earliest ones are Federal, and then they become Greek. And then they even evolve even more into Italianate architecture like you see at Longwood. And really it's the Civil War that brings this landscape of hospitality to a conclusion, because the wealth that was created 100% because of the labor of enslaved individuals goes away with the Civil War. And so these buildings become this sort of outlier in the architectural landscape because they're no longer being used in such a way that they were from about 1790 until 1860. And it really is all because the cotton gin is introduced here in Natchez in that early period in the last part of the 18th century, and that mechanization allows for the sort of remarkable investment in cotton plantation land and industrial complex that generated so much wealth. The billiard house was used as a billiard hall, but then in the 20th century it was also used as a space for dances and public events and whatnot, and so right now it's actually vacant. And the hope is, with a grant that the city got with the help of the Historic Natchez Foundation from the state of Mississippi, that they'll be able to rehabilitate that building and use it once more for public events. And it really is a part of a broader sort of investment in Duncan Park by the city to reinvigorate the space for public use. It is, you know, again, if you think about what having a billiard hall says about you as an individual in the 1830s, you have the means to invest in these spaces of leisure and hospitality. And so again, it's one of a few that exist in Natchez, but in the broader context of the Louisiana and Mississippi and sort of deep South, very few of these sort of hospitality-driven spaces exist. And so the grant that the Historic Natchez Foundation got to work on the billiard hall, but also to work on the columns on the front of the main structure, are sort of the priority focus for that grant. And that assessment was done by our students last year as a part of preparing the grant to go to the SHPO office in Jackson. And so, you know, for our program, we really view how we train students and what we train students on to be impact oriented. And so it's not just about them learning, but it provides a positive outcome for stakeholders that we work with. And so, you know, we view our program in working on historic buildings and preservation, we view that as needing to have positive benefit for stakeholders in the community. And so that's really why we're here in Natchez, to work on this building. And it's a part of a broader relationship between our program and the Historic Natchez Foundation to study the outbuildings of Natchez and Adams County and to work with private homeowners, the city, the National Park Service to reinterpret these spaces more equitably, to really understand the breadth of experiences, particularly those of enslaved individuals that lived and worked here at places like Auburn from the 19th century up until 1860. All these students are first and second years in the preservation program, and that is a Master's of Science at Tulane. And so this is their core studio in building documentation and investigation. And so we have 10 students here, both from the preservation program, but also from the architecture program, who are learning how to investigate a building, how to draw by hand. We're also introducing them to laser scanning, drone survey, all the innovative technology that we use in preservation, and really broadly, the study of the built environment. Our program is incredibly lucky to be able to work with people like the City of Natchez, with people like the Historic Natchez Foundation, particularly Carter Burns and Mimi Miller are amazing advocates in this place, and it makes this place so special. And it's really, their advocacy and their partnership with us that not only allows us to provide them resources that they don't have in terms of investigating buildings, but also provides our students with a model of how they can be the next generation of leaders in our field.